She sat across from me at my own dining table, smiled like an angel, and looked me dead in the eyes and said, $500,000, or you'll never see your grandchildren. My hands were trembling under the table. My husband had gone pale. But my son just sat there, completely calm. And that's when I realized he already knew this was coming, and he had a plan.
Let me take you back a little, because you need to understand the kind of woman I am before you can understand what happened that Sunday afternoon. My name is Carol. I'm 61 years old. I live in a modest but beautiful home in Raleigh, North Carolina. My husband Richard and I have been married for 38 years. We're not rich people. We're comfortable. We worked hard our whole lives, Richard as a contractor, me as a school librarian for 26 years. We saved carefully, invested wisely, and by the grace of God, we built something real. Something solid. We have 2 kids. Our daughter Melissa lives in Denver with her husband and 2 beautiful kids. She calls every Sunday without fail. Then there's our son, Daniel. 34 years old. Tall, quiet, thoughtful. The kind of man who opens doors for strangers and tips 25% at diners. We raised him right. Or at least, we thought we did everything right, until he brought home Vanessa. Daniel met Vanessa about 2 years ago at a work conference in Atlanta. He called me the night he met her and said, "Mom, I think I met someone special." And I remember feeling that warm rush of excitement any mother feels when her child sounds genuinely happy. The first time he brought her home for dinner, she was charming. Stunning, actually. Long dark hair, perfect nails, one of those smiles that fills a whole room. She hugged me at the door, called me Mrs. Carroll, and brought a bottle of red wine and a bouquet of white roses. I thought, oh, this girl has class. But here's the thing about charm. Real charm warms you slowly, like sunlight. Performed charm? That one burns. Over the next several months, I started noticing small things. Little cracks in the perfect picture. The first red flag came about 4 months into their relationship. Daniel mentioned casually on the phone that Vanessa had asked him to stop splitting expenses with her. She felt it was unromantic. He laughed it off. I didn't say anything. Couples work these things out. The second flag came at Thanksgiving. Vanessa spent most of the evening on her phone at the table, and when I gently asked about her family, she gave me a vague answer about being estranged, and quickly changed the subject. No details. No warmth. Just a wall with a smile painted on it. By Christmas, Daniel had already paid off one of her credit cards, somewhere around $8,000 in debt. He told me that, too casually, like it was nothing. I bit my tongue. He was an adult. It wasn't my place. Then in February, about 8 months after they met, Daniel called me one evening and something in his voice sounded different. Heavier. He said, "Mom, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to worry." I almost laughed. Because every mother on earth knows that sentence means worry. He told me that Vanessa had been pushing him to ask us, meaning Richard and me, for money. She had this idea that we should help them buy a house. Not loan the money. Give it. She'd said to him, and I'm quoting directly what my son told me. "Your parents are sitting on all that money and you're struggling. That's not fair to you." I kept my voice steady on the phone. I asked Daniel how he felt about it. He was quiet for a long moment, and then said, "Mom, I don't want anything from you and Dad. I never have. I just wanted you to know what's going on." I thanked him for telling me. We hung up. And then I sat in my kitchen and cried quietly for about 10 minutes. Not because of the money. But because I could hear it in his voice, this low, exhausted confusion of a man who loves a woman and is slowly starting to realize she might not love him the same way back. But what happened next completely changed everything. 3 months later, Daniel proposed. He called me the night before to tell me his plan. He sounded nervous and sweet and so genuinely in love that I tucked my worries away and chose to be happy for him. Vanessa said yes. She posted the engagement photos on Instagram within about 45 minutes. I counted. In every single photo, she made sure the ring was visible. It was a beautiful ring. Daniel had saved for a year for it. When I called to congratulate her, she answered with, "Isn't it gorgeous? I'm so glad he finally listened to me about the cut." Not, "I'm so happy." Not, "I love your son." The ring. The cut. I told Richard that night and he said, "Carol, maybe you're reading too much into it." Maybe I was. I wanted to be wrong. Lord, I wanted to be wrong. Then came that Sunday. The Sunday that I will never forget as long as I live. It was a warm April afternoon. I had been cooking since 10 in the morning, pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, fresh cornbread. I do it every time my kids come home. It's my love language. The house smelled like Sunday and family and everything good. Daniel and Vanessa arrived at noon. Daniel kissed my cheek, helped Richard set the table, and I noticed he barely touched Vanessa. They weren't fighting, it was subtler than that. It was the quiet distance of two people who'd been arguing and hadn't finished. We sat down to eat. The first 20 minutes were pleasant enough. We talked about the wedding. They were looking at venues in Charlotte. Richard made a joke about the cost of wedding cakes. We laughed. And then Vanessa set down her fork. Gently, deliberately. She folded her hands on the table like she was about to chair a business meeting. She looked at Richard first, then at me, and she smiled that perfect smile. "I've been wanting to talk to you both about something important," she said. "Daniel and I have been doing a lot of thinking about our future. About stability. About what kind of life we want to build." I nodded. Kept eating. Stayed calm. "The truth is," she continued, "Daniel works hard, but the market is brutal right now. And I think family is supposed to support family." She paused. "We need $500,000. As a gift. To buy a house and get ourselves established properly. I think it's the right thing to do for your son." The table went completely silent. Richard stopped chewing. I felt the blood drain slowly from my face. She didn't flinch. She just kept that smile going, like she just asked me to pass the salt. And then she said the part that broke something inside me. "And honestly, if you're not willing to help your own son, I'd have to wonder what kind of grandparents you'd really be. We'd have to make some hard decisions about how involved you'd be in our children's lives." There it was. The threat wrapped up in silk. My husband pushed his chair back slightly. I could feel his anger radiating from across the table. But before either of us could speak, Daniel looked up. And for the first time since they'd walked through the door, he looked completely, almost eerily calm. "Vanessa," he said quietly. "That's enough." She turned to him like she hadn't heard him correctly. "Daniel," I said, "that's enough? I'm going to be honest with you." In that moment, I felt about 6 different emotions at the exact same time. I felt rage, slow and deep, like water heating before it boils. I felt humiliation, that this woman had sat at my table, eaten my food, and looked me in the eye and threatened to keep my grandchildren from me if I didn't write her a check. I felt heartbreak, for Daniel. For what I could see was happening to him right in front of me. And underneath all of it, I felt guilty. Which is the most insidious thing about being a mother. Even when someone wrongs you completely, some small voice whispers, "Did I miss something? Should I have seen this coming sooner? Could I have protected him?" Richard reached under the table and put his hand on mine. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Vanessa was still talking, something about how she wasn't trying to cause conflict, how she just believed in being direct, how she thought we were all mature adults here. The words were washing over me like noise. Because I was watching Daniel. And he wasn't surprised. He wasn't embarrassed. He was resolved. That evening, after Vanessa excused herself to get some air, which really meant she went to the back porch to make phone calls, Daniel sat down with Richard and me in the living room. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and he said, "Mom, Dad, I need you to know that I had no part in that. And I need to tell you some things I should have told you months ago. And for the next 40 minutes, our son told us everything. Vanessa had been pushing the $500,000 demand for weeks. When Daniel refused to ask us, she'd started making the threats about access to future children. She had done this before, with her previous long-term boyfriend's family. Squeezed them for money, then disappeared. But here's the part one wasn't ready for. Daniel had quietly consulted a family attorney 3 weeks earlier. He'd been documenting everything: text messages, voice memos of conversations, even a handwritten note she'd left him itemizing what she felt she was owed from his family. He had built a paper trail with a calm, quiet deliberateness that honestly stunned me. He looked at us and said, "I'm ending the engagement. I've already spoken to the attorney. I just needed today to happen in front of you, so you could see it yourself. So you'd know I wasn't overreacting." I started crying. I'm not ashamed of it. Not sad tears, something more complicated than that. Relief. Pride. Grief for what he'd been carrying alone. Richard shook Daniel's hand and then pulled him into a hug, which Richard does maybe twice a decade, so that tells you everything. "You should have come to us sooner, son," Richard said. And Daniel said, "I know. I just needed to be sure. I thought that was the end of it." I was wrong. When Vanessa came back inside, Daniel told her calmly and clearly that the engagement was over. That she should collect her things from his apartment at her convenience, and that his attorney would be in touch regarding the ring, which under North Carolina law is a conditional gift she was required to return. She laughed first. That sharp, disbelieving laugh people use when they're caught off guard. Then she cried. Big, theatrical tears. She looked at me, and said, "Carol, talk to your son. He's making a mistake." I looked right back at her and said, "Honey, the only mistake made here today was yours." She left 20 minutes later. Slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, we found out from a family friend that Vanessa had apparently gone to social media, posted a vague but emotional story about being blindsided by a family that never accepted her. Classic narrative reversal. Make yourself the victim before anyone else can tell the real story. What she didn't account for was that Daniel had quietly, methodically, already shared the documented evidence with a few key mutual friends and his employer, because she had also made some professional threats in those text messages. Nothing explosive. Just enough so that people who knew them both understood what had actually happened. Within a week, the social media sympathy had dried up. People who'd initially commented supportive things went quiet. One of her closest friends, a woman named Tara, actually reached out to Daniel privately to apologize for not seeing the pattern sooner. It turned out Vanessa had done a version of this twice before. Different men, different families, same playbook. The performance of love, the slow escalation, the money demand, the threats. The difference this time was that she'd underestimated my son. It's been about 8 months since that Sunday afternoon. Daniel is doing well. Better than well, actually. He threw himself back into his work, reconnected with some old friends he'd quietly drifted from during the relationship, and recently started dating someone new, a quiet, bookish woman named Sarah who brought him homemade banana bread on their third date, and apparently spent their last Saturday helping him organize his bookshelf. He told me that on the phone, and I actually had to put the phone down and compose myself because it made me so happy. He still comes home for Sunday dinners. He always will. Richard and I sat on our back porch one evening not long ago, watching the light go down behind the trees. And he said to me, "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said, "What?" He said, "That she thought she had us. She really thought she walked in that door and had us." I nodded. "And our boy had already built the exit," Richard said. That's the thing about quiet people. The Vanessas of the world always mistake quietness for weakness. They see a man who doesn't raise his voice and they think he won't raise his standards. They see a family that sets a warm table and they think will give away anything to keep the peace. They're wrong. Here's what I want you to take from this story. Pay attention to people who charm you quickly but reveal themselves slowly. Genuine love doesn't come with price tags. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't negotiate your access to your own grandchildren over pot roast. And if you have a child going through something like this, trust them. Stay close. Keep the door open and the porch light on. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a parent can do isn't write a check. It's raise a child who knows their own worth, and has the quiet courage to walk away before it costs them everything. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've ever had to protect yourself or someone you love from someone like Vanessa, drop it in the comments. You're not alone. I'll see you in the next one.